Hi all, thanks for joining. We are going to give it a few minutes for folks to work out the logistics of the transition before we get started, but so happy to have you join us today.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Sorry it took me a minute to get in here. I'm going to give folks a moment to log in.
Hello, this is Erwin, the other Spanish interpreter.
Great, thank you for joining us. Do I need to add you as an interpreter? I see that we already have Elizabeth.
Yes.
The other breakout session.
And Erwin, what is your Zoom name?
It says, I believe, monitor line Erwin.
Okay. All right, there. I think that I did it. All right, great. Thank you all so much for joining us. And it looks like we have about 13 people with us. And we thought that it would be nice if everyone could at least drop their name, their pronouns, and where they're joining us from in the chat. And with that, I guess I should start. I am Liz Barber. I'm the Reproductive Freedom Fellow with the ACLU of North Carolina, she, her pronouns. And with me here today is my colleague, Jackie Maffatori, and I'll let her say hello.
Hi everybody, my name is Jackie or Jacqueline Maffatori. I also use she, her pronouns. I am a staff attorney with the ACLU of North Carolina, and I am very excited to join you and appreciate you bearing with our logistical and technical difficulties today.
All right, so Jackie is going to put together a poll for us, giving you all some options about what you all would like to hear about in our work over the last year plus, both what we've done and what's going on now in regards to reproductive freedom. So the options in the poll are going to be to hear about what's going on in the legislature, both the good bills or good bill and the bad bills. Also the lawsuit, Planned Parenthood South Atlantic versus Moore that we filed in September of 2020. And then the last option is Text Abby, which is about youth access to abortion in North Carolina. And so while we plan on touching on all four of those subjects, getting your interest will let us know how we should apportion our time.
So since there are so few of us here together, I'm having some logistical difficulties with the polling, but I don't want that to delay us in getting started. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to drop in the chat the 4 different options of things, or the 4 different things we are going to talk about today. And we would love to hear about in the chat from you which things you are the most interested in us focusing on today, so that we can make sure that we're spending this time the way that you guys, our members, want us to spend this time. So I'm going to just drop those in the chat numbered, and just feel free, please reply with 1, 2, 3, or 4. Which one are you the most interested in hearing about today, so that we make sure to spend our time accordingly.
And I will say that we hope for this to be as much of a conversation as it can be. And so please feel free to drop your questions in the chat so we can try to address those as we go along.
All right, so I'm seeing a lot of number 3s. I'm seeing a couple of 4s. I'm seeing a couple 1s. You guys don't want to hear about positive, exciting, happy things, it seems like, but we're going to talk to you about them anyway. If you want to weigh in about what you're most excited to hear about today, please do so within the next minute or so. Otherwise, we're going to get going. And again, so happy to have you all join us.
All right, so Jackie, do you want to get us started with bad abortion bills?
Absolutely. So we have only seen 2 bad abortion bills out of the legislature so far this year, though we certainly expect to see more. But as of right now, what we have seen so far in this legislative session that we'll have to contend with and hope to see defeated. The first is House Bill 158. House Bill 158 is a proposed constitutional amendment that would define life as beginning at fertilization. The proposed text of the amendment not only defines life as beginning at fertilization, but also essentially makes it a constitutional right to defend a life by deadly force if necessary, which would in essence make it justified to kill someone else for trying to end a pregnancy. This constitutional amendment obviously would have horrible consequences for an abortion if passed, but we think is highly unlikely to pass. The language of the constitutional amendment is really broad and has lots of potential unintended consequences completely outside of the abortion context, but nonetheless it's pretty extreme even for somebody who is anti-choice in its language and would arguably be against the United States Constitution. The thing about constitutional amendments is that they need to be voted on by the electorate of the entire state of North Carolina, even if the legislature decides to pass them. So even if this did pass the legislature, it wouldn't be automatically a part of our Constitution, but we're hopeful and think it likely that it's not even going to pass our legislature. The second bad bill that we're seeing out of our legislature thus far in this legislative session is House Bill 31, which is a prohibition on abortions for any time a fetus has a detectable heartbeat. Normally, you can detect a fetal heartbeat at about 6 weeks. And by 6 weeks, most women don't even realize that they're pregnant, especially if they weren't intending or weren't trying to conceive a pregnancy. So this would all but prohibit abortion in almost every case. The only exception to the bill is for medical necessity. So this bill is pretty ridiculous because North Carolina recently had a 20-week abortion ban that was struck down as unconstitutional in the federal court system. So if a 20-week abortion ban is unconstitutional, then a 6-week or earlier abortion ban is certainly unconstitutional in kind, but we are seeing these kinds of bills all over the country prohibiting abortion far earlier than we already understand it's unconstitutional to prohibit abortion, because some anti-choice states are hoping for a change at the United States Supreme Court level. Obviously, we are hoping for the exact opposite. So while we are optimistic that neither of these bills will become law, it's certainly scary that they're even being introduced in the first place here in the year of 2021, and we can expect more on the horizon. So if you have any questions about these, please drop them in the chat, and we will make sure to revisit your questions when we get to the end. But I also wanted to touch quickly about our lawsuit. I saw a couple of folks were interested in hearing about the lawsuit in the chat. So we have brought a lawsuit challenging several North Carolina abortion restrictions, along with the Center for Reproductive Rights, Planned Parenthood of North Carolina. And so Planned Parenthood of South Atlantic, and the Center for Reproductive Freedom at the ACLU National. And that lawsuit seeks to ensure that every single person in the state of North Carolina has the ability to make autonomous decisions about their own bodies, their own lives, their own futures, and whether and when to become a parent. That lawsuit is framed under a reproductive justice lens. So what that means is we're not just seeking to have abortion declared a right. We're seeking to ensure that the right to an abortion is meaningful by ensuring that everyone has access to abortions in the state of North Carolina, and everybody has access to reproductive health care in the state of North Carolina, regardless of their race, whether they live in an urban versus rural area, their socioeconomic status, because what we know is burdens placed on the ability to get an abortion fall the heaviest on people of color, people in rural communities, and people from lower economic means in the state of North Carolina. The restrictions that we are challenging, there are 5 of them, and none of them have any medical justification whatsoever. There is a ban that prevents qualified medical professionals who are not technically physicians from administering even a medication abortion. So what that means is that a nurse practitioner who would be able to do quite really complicated procedures under appropriate supervision literally can't even give somebody a pill to issue a medication abortion. We are challenging a ban on use of telemedicine for medication abortion. North Carolina has a requirement that that a doctor be physically present in the room with a woman when she takes the first pill and in a series of 2 pills for medication abortion, even though she's not going to have any effect from taking that pill until long after she's left the office. And that's ridiculous, especially during a COVID-19 pandemic when in-person visits are unsafe and unnecessary in a lot of cases. We're also challenging a scheme of regulations, targeted regulation of abortion providers scheme, which you hear called the TRAP scheme, that places unreasonable restrictions on the facilities providing abortion, making them comply with certain hallway widths and things that just aren't even necessary to provide abortion care, in order to make it more difficult to even open a clinic that would be compliant in order to have abortions performed there. And then finally, we're challenging 2 provisions that go hand in hand. In North Carolina, you have to receive scripted biased counseling regarding your choice to have an abortion, regardless of your circumstance, regardless of the reason why you are having to have that abortion. And that takes away a doctor's ability to have empathy and make informed decisions about their patients. And abortion patients are required to wait 72 hours after hearing that bias counseling in order to obtain an abortion. This can cause delays that make it, in some cases impossible to have the type of procedure that a woman wants. In some cases, impossible to have any abortion at all. I'm sorry, I said women, I mean people. In some cases, it makes it impossible to even obtain the abortion at all. So none of those provisions have medical justification. All they do is make it more difficult for people to access abortion, and more particularly, it makes it more difficult, if not impossible, for the most marginalized North Carolinians to have an abortion. We're challenging all of those restrictions under the North Carolina Constitution because we think that the North Carolina Constitution's guarantee to life, liberty, happiness, the pursuit of your own labor, and the guarantees to equal protection of the laws for all, as well as our guarantees to privacy, demand more for the state of North Carolina than these laws provide. And we want to ensure that all North Carolinians have equal access to reproductive health care and make reproductive justice a reality. And so I'll stop rambling. If you have questions about this, please do drop them in the chat. And I would love for Liz to talk to us about some happy good things that are taking place to combat our legislature's repressive efforts around reproductive health care.
Great, thanks, Jackie. So sticking with the legislature, but then also looking at these restrictions that we're challenging in the lawsuit is the RBG Act, and that is an act to remove barriers to gain access to abortion. And that act will be introduced next week. Realistically, given who's in control of the legislature, we don't expect that to become law anytime soon, but we also think that it's important to get out there and to talk about the reality, right? And talk about what the medicine actually says and what people need in North Carolina, as opposed to letting the Republicans control the narrative, or really the antis, I should say, control the narrative. And so the RBG Act would take out 4 of those same provisions that Jackie was talking about. It would do away with the telemedicine ban. It would do away with the ban on advanced practitioners, such as midwives, certified nurse midwives, being able to perform medical abortions, and then also procedural abortions. And to be clear, for medical abortions, that is the same as a miscarriage management. And as far as medically speaking, the medicines, the doses, how they're prescribed, everything. In the context of miscarriage management, a certified nurse midwife can prescribe that medicine. In the context of abortion, the certified nurse midwife cannot prescribe that medicine. And so really all of these things. And then the third was the mandatory delay, 72-hour mandatory delay. North Carolina has the longest in the country. We share that honor with Missouri, Arkansas, a few other states I can't remember. And then also looking at how you can pay for your abortion. And so that's one difference in the RBG Act versus the lawsuit, is the lawsuit is not challenging the restrictions on having health insurance cover abortion. But in North Carolina, the statutes do not allow for the state health plan to cover abortion, and it also doesn't allow for any insurance plan that is going to be on the it escapes me right now, the ACA marketplace, there we go, to cover abortion. And so that's what the RBG Act covers. And I think that I get to cover all of the happy stuff. Jackie did the fighting side, right? What we have to fight. And staying with sort of the happy theme is what you all heard me talk about a little bit in working on youth access to abortion. And so North Carolina is one of 37 states, actually 38 now, that has what we call forced parental involvement laws. And that is that if you're under a certain age in North Carolina, that age is 18, then in order to have an abortion, you have to have the permission of a parent, a legal guardian, or a grandparent with whom you have lived for at least 6 months. The only other option And the United States Supreme Court mandated that there be another option shortly after Roe versus Wade was decided, saying that yes, young people too have the right to an abortion, not just people who are over 18, is to have something called a judicial waiver. And that process, it's just intimidating. And it's really interesting to me that the courts actually struck down, if the only option is getting parental consent, the court said, no, you can't do that. It's substituting someone else's judgment as to what's best for the young person for their own judgment. And you can't do that when you're dealing with a constitutional right. It's too burdensome and it could be arbitrary. But they said they could go in front of a judge and then that would be okay. And so how going in front of a judge, literally starting a court proceeding as a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old is somehow less burdensome than getting the permission from your parent. It blows my mind. But anyway, that's where we are in North Carolina. And until Text Abby was launched, young people were out there just having to figure this out on their own. And so in April of last year, in partnership with Carolina Abortion Fund, the ACLU launched Text Abby. It is a text line because what we hear is that's how young people communicate these days, for them to text in and get all questions about abortion access in North Carolina answered. We are answering logistical questions. We are not answering medical questions. We are not counseling them on their options. We will refer people to that. But what we found is that people, by the time they reach out to us, they have already talked with whoever it is that they're going to talk to about this decision and have decided on abortion. And then we connect them with a lawyer to help them navigate the process. And so far, we've been very successful. And it was sort of a build it. We think there's a need, but we didn't have any real way of knowing that there's a need. We've had well over 50 waivers at this point, and that's just for the people who have been pregnant, have decided on abortion, and have needed a waiver. There are many people in addition to that who we've counseled who ended up, it was a pregnancy scare, or they've decided to travel out of state in order to get an abortion. So I guess maybe just the last thing I'll add about forced parental involvement laws is what we see is that you can't legislate good family communications or good family dynamics, right? If we could do that, then so many of the world's problems would just be solved. And so with these young people, when you look at states that have these laws versus states that don't have these laws, young people are getting abortions at the same rate. In states that have these laws, they're waiting longer. So we're seeing later gestational age for when they're getting abortions. And we're seeing them travel out of state in order to get an abortion. So if you're in North Carolina, the closest place you can go to get an abortion without parental involvement is Washington, D.C. If you're 17, you can go to South Carolina because South Carolina's laws don't kick in. You can consent for yourself for abortion at 17. So that's what we see. We see the third finding is that young people consult with a trusted adult at the same rate, whether they're required to or not. So if you are comfortable talking to your mom or your dad or your aunt or whoever it is about that decision, you're going to, regardless of whether or not the law requires you to. And so that doesn't leave us very much time for questions, but we would love to open it up.
So we have a couple of things in the chat, and Liz, one person asks us if there's anything that can be done, or if there's anything that can be done about the crisis pregnancy centers in the state, which get so much money. Would you like to field that?
Sure. So what this person's referring to is crisis pregnancy centers or fake clinics. They put themselves out there really for fundraising purposes. They are honest in that they are trying to find abortion determined people and prevent them from having an abortion. And they use some really kind of tricky, deceptive ways to do that. Offering free pre-abortion counseling, free pregnancy tests, those sorts of things. They pull people in. Many people think that they're abortion clinics, that they're actually going to be able to get an abortion there. They will dress in medical clothing. Usually there isn't anyone with any medical qualification there. They have an ultrasound machine, which it's just kind of like me or you running the ultrasound machine. They will frequently underestimate the gestational age so that people think that maybe they have a longer time to make a decision. They show them videos that, sort of made in Hollywood that don't have any bearing in reality or medicine or science. And our state legislature gives them money every year, gives them money for new iPads to pave their parking lot, for whatever it is. And as an aside, a doctor who I work with, she actually treats pregnant people who want to stay pregnant and want to take care of their pregnancy to the best of their ability. And this doctor is in a rural clinic that also gets state funding, and she doesn't have the funding to get an ultrasound, even though she's treating people and needs it for medical purposes. Yet here our government is giving money to these clinics that aren't real clinics, right? So what we can do is we can educate people about it. I think most people have no idea what these fake clinics are. Look around, find them in your community, because I guarantee they are more fake clinics in North Carolina by far than there are real abortion clinics. And that's something that we deal with a lot in working with Text Abby. We talk to people, the young person texts in, I'm just going to go to the local abortion clinic. Where are you? I'm in Greenville, North Carolina. There are no abortion clinics in Greenville, North Carolina. Writing to our state legislators, usually I think that when it happens in the budget, and I am not very familiar with the budget process. And so I don't really know how all of that goes down, but other than education and writing to our state representatives, I'm not sure what else there is to do.
And so it doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat. We did have one comment. I'm concerned that our anti-choice legislators will be emboldened by the ban just passed in South Carolina. I will say, the same partners that we're working with in our lawsuit here in North Carolina turned around and filed suit against that law, and before it was even pen to paper by the governor to put it into law, and succeeded in getting it enjoined, which means prohibited, stopped the very next day. So our legislature just recently went through an expensive legal battle about an unconstitutional abortion bill, and hopefully the shell shock of that will keep them from wanting to make that exact same move again soon. But laws can be changed. The people have the power. So just please keep that in mind. There's always hope, even when things look bleak. We're getting probed to move back into the main room. I'm sorry that we don't have more time to talk. Where in Mecklenburg can kids get an abortion? I am new here.
So I'll fill that quickly. Jackie dropped Carolina Abortion Fund website in the chat, and they list all of the abortion clinics in North Carolina. Another safe place to find one, and this is nationwide, is ineedana.org. All of the clinics found there are legitimate abortion clinics. And Charlotte is lucky. They have 2 abortion clinics, A Woman's Choice and Planned Parenthood are both there. But thank you all for joining us. I am dropping a link to the other Zoom for the main gathering. And feel free to look us up on the website or find our email addresses. We're all happy to field other